All right, here we are, everybody. Jem Schofield here of the C47 and another episode of Gearbox 2.0 live stream edition. This is episode 40 something. Let me see what it is. I can't even remember. What number is it? Jeez. Here we go. I don't know, 43, I think. What's up, Bart? How's everybody doing? Let me know how it's going over there. Let me know if you can hear me and if everything else is going all right. If you hear a noise upstairs, it sounds like there's a woodpecker pecking on the side of the barn. What's odd, though, well, whatever. We'll handle that later on. All right, so if I seem like I'm a little bit out of sorts, I am. I just got back we'll just say last night, after being away for the better part of over 2 weeks. I went on one trip, came back for like 12 hours to do my laundry, and then headed out to the airport again to PDX to fly to Atlanta for a basically 10-day production for MZed Pro. Bart says things here are busy over there. Short weeks do not mean less work, just less time. So you must be in the States. We have the 4th of July coming, which means, at least here in this country, everybody will be taking the day off. And a lot of people will be taking off Friday because it's on a Thursday this time. And they'll have a 4-day weekend. I'm not going to get that, but I will get the 4th off, so that's good. Hey, Sam. Hey, Richard in Ireland. My grandfather was Irish. He was also apparently a bigamist, but that's a whole other story that we don't need to get into today. So let's just chat here. As always, welcome. You're welcome to ask questions about gear and production. And what I wanted to do today was at least start the conversation about this production that I've been planning and have been a part of for months now. And then we've just wrapped on July 1st. So I'm back here, and again, a little bit jet lagged, a little bit out of sorts, a little bit sort of getting my bearings back after over a couple of weeks of being away. Lots of emails going back and forth, a lot of admin on the production being done now, just making sure that we're dotting I's, crossing T's, making sure we have all of our release forms for everything, location releases, model releases. I've got 2 more to get, but they won't be a problem because they're people who wanted to be in the video. And I thought it might be a good idea to sort of chat out what the production was that I was involved with and what my role was. Some of the challenges, and of course in the chat you can ask questions about the production if you'd like. So the setup is basically MZed Pro, and this is a course with somebody named Ray Roman, who is a high-end wedding filmmaker, and he's very well known in his sphere. He's also somebody who does workshops. He's done some other education stuff in the past, but the idea would be, hey Travis, would be to do an in-depth course on how he goes about his process with his team when they go in and they shoot these high-end weddings. So they do a lot of traveling. They travel all over the US, all over the world, and they do big scale. Sometimes they do weddings that have up to 1,500 people, South Asian Indian weddings, a lot of those, which of course have tremendous possibilities for production value. And it was really interesting to see the process in terms of how he goes about it with his team, which is relatively small. It's generally 3 people, and it's not big cranes and things like that. It's relatively small scale. It's just understanding how he goes about it. So most of their stuff is shot on higher end DSLR cameras, 1DX Mark IIs, and then they do have a C200 that they use sometimes, but that's primarily for corporate and commercial productions. And then they use, of course, a drone, and they have a Movi, and they just sort of, they have their formula in terms of how they go about doing their stuff. And so that's what we were doing. We were doing a multi-hour course, which is now going to go into post-production, which I'm not handling, for Ray Roman Films and his approach. So really interesting because, you know, unlike something along the lines of masterclass where you have what I'm assuming, what I'm seeing, what I know are very healthy budgets. When you're producing a course like this, you have to do as much as you can to keep very high production value, but you have to be very, very reasonable in terms of what your costs are. You know, it's just not the same in terms of how you can approach it. You don't have the ability to go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably more than that, when you're talking about the talent that's involved with most of the masterclass courses. And you have to approach it from the standpoint of, okay, how do we do this in a small to no crew type of environment, but also keep production value high? Now, my role in the production was as a producer and director. So I went into this not as the executive producer, so that's really MZed's job in terms of overall big vision and overseeing sort of and driving what we were trying to do. And then my job was come in and actually on the ground produce the production itself, and more so than that, to be the director for the content. So that's how I was involved. But it still meant that I was finding crew, hiring crew. I was coordinating with, in this case, an event planner so that we could coordinate the location for part of the production, coordinating with the talent, not only Ray Roman and his team from Ray Roman Films, but also the talent that would be involved in the actual production. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And then, of course, you know, all of the stuff that you have to handle when you get on the ground besides that. So you have to take care of your crew. You have to feed everybody. You have to handle the logistics, at least in terms of travel and accommodations. And when you're doing it on a production of this size, as opposed to a larger production, medium size to large, most of those things are either handled exclusively by the producer or by the producer, and in this case, the executive producer, which would be MZed. So it's sort of a shared responsibility in terms of handling all of the logistics as we led up to the production. So it just takes an enormous amount of time. And one of the things that you have to do when you are approaching a project like this is you have to understand that the runway is long and that there will be a lot of pre-production days. Not all of those days are going to be 8 to 10 hour days. They might be 4 hours here, 6 hours there, 3 hours, you know, here and there. But they add up, and they really do take a lot of time to get a production like this going. So why don't we start with some frames here, just so you can get at least a little bit of an idea of some of the BTS. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up an application window. And again, this is Gearbox. This is the C47. So if you guys have questions, let's get into the chat here, because it's not a one-way street. I definitely want to have a dialogue with everybody about what we're talking about. So I've got the chat window open. I'm sharing some still images that are BTS images, and I'm happy to talk about any of the equipment that we were using on the production, why we chose the equipment that we were using, and everything else. So please, please, please ask questions now if you have them related to this. If somebody could just confirm that you're seeing the still images first, that would be great. It looks like you are seeing them. And also, just as a side note, don't forget that we're back with Cameron Flask today at 6 p.m. Eastern. We are talking about audio equipment, myself, Caleb Pike, and Ben Barden. So does everybody see these still images? Somebody give me a thumbs up or a yes or an okay, just so that I know that you're seeing this image. And then I'll start to break this down. Travis, Bart, Sam, Richard, somebody tell me. All right. If I don't get a heads up, I'm still going to keep talking. It says I'm sharing it. Seeing the pictures. Thanks, Bart. Okay, so here's the deal. What's up, Matt? Still in Toronto? I'm imagining. I would say. Dana Dolly is awesome. Good, awesome. All right, so you guys are gonna now people are alive. I'm barely alive right now, but you're gonna ask questions, and then let's get into this. Okay, so right now what we're looking at is the first setup that we did. So this production was split up into two parts. We're gonna say, I said it's 10-day production. That really included travel as well, but we had an 8-day core in terms of what we were doing. So we landed on the ground. We just made sure we did a kind of inventory, made sure everything was okay with our equipment. And then the following morning, we headed over to Ray Roman Films, to his studio. And we had basically a pre-pro, what we sort of call a checkout day, but we also had to take a lot of equipment and set it up because we had a lot of stuff from many manufacturers. Core one being Rode microphones, so we had a lot of Rode gear that we had to go through and make sure that that was all set up for the production, test everything, make sure our cameras were built up. It was a lot of stuff. So that was day one. And then we arrived here at this location, which was in Fayetteville, Georgia, called Daisy Hill, or the venue at Daisy Hill. Bart's got a puppy thing. All right, you're back. So Daisy Hill is basically a relatively brand new wedding and event venue, and beautiful space, beautiful building built from the ground up. And this is a location that Ray helped secure as a location for the portion of his course where we basically break down how he approaches production for pre-ceremony, ceremony, and reception for a wedding. Now, I don't have a history of doing wedding production, so part of my job as a producer director was to learn that process and then help Ray in terms of how he was going to deliver that content for the course. So here we are with our first setup here. We're obviously on a Dana Dolly, which Bart had recognized, and we're up on an O'Connor 1030 head with a C200. Now, why the C200? Well, between myself, MZed, and Ray Roman Films, there were 3 C200 bodies. One was a C200B, which we primarily use for a gimbal setup, which I'll talk about in a minute. The second was mine that we used as A camera, and then we used the other one from MZed as B camera. And the reason we chose that camera is while there may have been some slight advantages to going with something like a C300 Mark II, which has a higher internal data rate, bigger color space, and all of that fun stuff, it seemed to be, again, when we're talking about trying to keep the relative cost of a production down a little bit, that it would be the right choice to do that. Now, we decided not to shoot Cinema Raw Light because we were going to be shooting for 6 days in total. So we did 3 days here at Daisy Hill, and we did 3 days, which you'll see a little shot of over here, at Ray Roman's studio, which we built out specifically for the course. And so that's a lot of footage. When you're running 3 cameras consistently pretty much all of the time, at Daisy Hill, we were running 2 cameras a lot of the time and then bringing in the third when we needed it. You're still at 150 megabits per second, shooting over 6 days, relatively continuously, creating a lot of content. And the real thing that we wanted is we wanted log. We knew we were going to be finishing in Rec 709. We shot everything UHD 4K, and we just decided that with the AF system and some of the other stuff, though, most of the time we we had the crew and they were manually focusing and then using the focus assist feature. It just seemed like the right overall camera system to settle on for the production. Matt, you're right. The editor has a lot of work to do. One thing I will say is that except for B-roll, where we did verbals, which basically means we press record and whoever was the camera operator would say what it was that they were rolling on, we slated every actual take of the production. So there were a number of modules or sections of the course, and each one was slated with takes, number of cameras, all of that stuff. So that will help the editor considerably. And we We did a lot of audibles also, even when we were rolling on those slated takes, to make sure that there was enough information or as much information for the editor as we could give them. We also, in each major setup for the production, we rolled on a gray card and on a chip chart. And, you know, one of the things that you have to remember when you're shooting with Canon cameras, because right here you'll see in the foreground, James Kwan, who's the DP for the project, is they expose very differently than, let's say, an Alexa, which he shoots on a lot. So the latitude, or how much you can push and pull the image from an Alexa, is very different than what you can do with a Canon camera when you're shooting with that, even with a higher end one. You have to feed a Canon camera a lot of light. So you don't really want to put yourself in the position where you are exposing for where you want to be. You have to dial in your ratios, and then you have to make sure you're exposing that gray card somewhere between 40 and 50 IRE for your key, and then everything seems to fall into place because you're generally just making minor adjustments in the midtones. You shouldn't, if you have your highlights where they should be on the waveform monitor, be doing much there. And the goal is generally to adjust an image down so that you're not introducing and revealing noise in the shadows. We can't, so Baron's asking timecode or sync with wave files. Sync with Slate. I mean, we took all of those cameras each day and black balanced them. Megan, who was the AC, did that. Made sure that the free run time code was set to time of day as close as possible for all of the cameras that we were using. We did realize at one point when we pulled in Ray's camera after the fact of the Daisy Hill that the date was 1 day off. So we had to adjust that once we got into the studio for the other 3 days of production. So basically, we had a pre-pro kind of, you know, checkout day. We had 3 days at Daisy Hill, and then we moved to our next location, which was Ray's studio. And we had a load in and pre-light day to figure out the whole studio, which was, again, this kind of stuff right here. And then we had 3 days of production at his studio. So it was a lot of stuff. Let's talk about the crew. Oh, and by the way, Baron, so basically what we did is we just slated, and then we had our time code as close as possible. And then we'll probably, or the editor will probably sync to those slates in post-production. And then the other footage was just free run time of day, so they can look at that timestamp from each of the B-roll cameras. We were just running sort of whenever we had the opportunity to document the behind the scenes of the production. So what's the crew? So we had DP, who was first camera operator, besides myself, producer director. We had producer director, DP, who was first camera operator, AC, who was second camera operator. And then we had basically at Daisy Hill, we had 2 people in the G&E or grip and electric department. We had 1 person who was a gaffer, 1 person who was a grip. Okay, so there we have that. We had at Daisy Hill a sound recordist, who at one point or another had up to 8 mics because of the talent that we had to bring in to recreate this wedding scenario. And then we had a PA who was so much more than a production assistant. Johan was just a rock star on this production and did so many things. And he basically became an extension of the grip and electric and also the camera department. And I can't thank my crew enough for what they did on the production. Now, we didn't keep sound for the studio part of the production over here. So I handled sound in this location, and we were running Rode microphones all around, but this was an NT55, which is a cardioid mic, and then we were using a Rode FILMMAKER kit that was converted with their XLR Plus adapter so that we could plug that into the XLR input of the C200. So that was running to that, and then it was reference audio with other mics for the other cameras that were running. So no questions? What's going on here? I'll just keep breaking stuff down. So let's go ahead and go to a wide here so you can get a better sense of that setup. We actually this is not what Ray was in terms of wardrobe for the final, but you'll see that we got two 4x4 floppies, camera right, and those are of course running for negative fill. We've got a little bit of ultra bounce on camera left, and that's giving us a little bit of fill on the right side of Ray's face. That's ultra bounce, and then of course black on the other side, but the ultra bounce is what is bouncing into Johan there, who's standing there with the slate. We've got Ben in the background, and behind him we've got a 4x frame, and pushing through that is actually a Joker. Oh, actually, is the Joker there? Let me just zoom in here. I think it is. Yeah, that's where we had the Joker placed most of the time. And then we have an ASTRA light, which is right there, which we had in a softbox, sometimes with diffusion and diffusion and a grid, sometimes just open face, sometimes with nothing at all. But the inside of the softbox is silver, so it helps kind of punch it a little bit more. And those played with batteries a lot. And then if you look in the foreground, you'll see another floppy there. That's just a courtesy because it was sunny as all you can imagine. And so we've got a courtesy for James here. And then we were feeding all of the cameras wirelessly using two of the new 7-inch units from SMALLHD. So I was basically looking at A and B camera because we didn't have a C camera running for this setup. So we always had an A and B, and that's kind of the setup that we're looking at right there. This is an interior setup for an interview. And if you look on the left, well, let me just see if there's anything else I can show you on that exterior. Okay, so there you go. So now you see another view. There's the, we weren't fully set up here. Actually, we were. What we actually wound up doing was another setup in almost the same location here. And you'll see that we've got, so we've got right there the NTG 8, and that's basically the boomed mic. And then he had the lavalier. And then in this setup, on the left-hand side over Ben, or by Ben, who has the hat on, we also have some bounce there. And no, we had, for these setups, there was definitely a little bit of cloud cover, and we didn't have a silk over him in this setup, but we have in the, in some of the setups, we did actually have that. The support was basically the Dana Dolly support system, and then you'll see right here on this shot, there's also a center support, just to make sure for that 5-foot run that we didn't have any major wobble, especially because you can see that the camera's sitting relatively high off of the Dana Dolly. And that seemed to work out pretty well. I mean, we used that setup for pretty much everything. We're using a lot of SMALLHD monitors again, with the 5 inches were on the cameras with the transmitters, and then the 7 inches were the receiving ones that I use for my director's monitors, and we were feeding both A and B to that. So I had 2 separate monitors that were connected together for that. No timecode sync boxes, that's correct. If we were on C300s or FS7s with the extension unit, we would have jam synced, but we didn't do anything like that. We just slated. We had a smart slate, and we had reference audio coming from the sound recorders. But we know what we're getting into in terms of that. So that's exterior. There you go, one view. Another slightly different setup there. We've got a little bit of bounce over here, sometimes called the pizza. That's with a quacker clamp. That little pizza box is just basically there to give a little bit of a kicker. And yeah, Baron, this time of year, we get those afternoon rains. I've gotten lucky, knock on wood, there's an Apple box here, over the last couple of productions where we've been able to, for the most part, get lucky with the weather. If you actually look at this shot, one of the things that's interesting is you'll see all the dew on the ground that is there. And just camera right, you'll actually see it happening. There is Johan, and we had to actually sweep in the morning so that we didn't see that and the grass looked nice. And we, there's a lot of little small things there in terms of placing those Adirondack chairs, and we need a little bit of contrast, so we placed those, where we needed them to be. So there you go. That's your basic setup there. It also helps that Ray has hair. So when he's on camera, if I was there, we'd probably have to have some sort of topper there to diffuse that light and bring that down a little bit on me. But it seemed to work out pretty well for him. We go over here to an interior. This is an interview setup with 2 people, and they had very different heights. So we had some Apple boxes, so it wasn't Ray and then 2 much shorter women in this case. And if you look on the left side of frame, we've got a light mat there, which came. So we had basically we did a 1-ton, and we had a little lighting package. So the gaffer brought both grip and electric in his van. It's like a little magic carpet bag when he brought everything out. And we just put in an order for things, and he had his basic package, and then we added in terms of lighting. The big one was the Joker 800 kit. And then we also added some fixtures like ASTRAs and some dados and some other stuff. But these light mats were in there because he owns them, and we used a 4-foot and a 2-foot version of that. They were version 1, so I wasn't thrilled with the lack of output from them, but they were used just to create a very large catch light, a little bit of fill. But the main light is the Joker, and what we're doing is we're pushing that through basically 2 pieces of diffusion there. So you've got the first one, which we call a breaker, and that's breaking up the light, and then the second one, which is softening it even more. And then we have some other stuff for just the fact that there's 3 people, so you'll see other lights on the other side. Some of them sometimes were set up and not used, and most of the time they were used, but this one is going through a 4x with a grid. And then we walked in some negative fill, and there were adjustments. This is just me trying to get a couple of little BTS shots on set. So we had a bunch of these, we had a bunch of these on camera. On camera, like 2 camera setups. We did an interview with the DJ, which I don't have any BTS of, but the formula wasn't completely different all around. The idea was to give a little bit of shape to Ray in terms of the look and feel, but still, not make it completely side key in terms of what we were doing. So when we moved into his studio space and we started to set up in there, we had to set design it. So we bought these 2, basically, I'm going blank right here. 2 things to basically forms that could put a wedding dress on it and the top of a tux. So of course it's a wedding filmmaking course, so you can see that. He had a bunch of these pretty cool lights that we started to build around, and then there were some other fixtures all around. The main source here was a couple of Astras 4Xs pushing through this 4x, which also had a grid on the other side just to minimize spill to the rest of the set. And that wound up being our main key light. And then we had to flag a lot of that light. And then we had some Ultra Bounce here, a 4x Ultra, which was creating some fill. And the idea was to pretty much do a Rembrandt kind of look and feel. So we had a nice little triangle on the left side of his face and just walked in and out that fill as necessary. We made adjustments to where the key was, and then you can kind of see a lot of flagging here on the left-hand side from the C camera. And then we created a little bit of a slash of light in the background because we wanted to lift that a little. So we've got a harder source here, which is a dado LED, and that's pushing through a couple of flags, small flags, and that's why you see that little opening there, and that's what's creating this slash on the background. So there's a lot of tweaking involved, and then we sent the frames to the, to MZed to take a look at, and they liked the frames, but they made a couple of comments like there wasn't enough color. So before we actually rolled camera on the first production day here, we picked up and put together a couple of flower arrangements, which helped pop color a little bit, and a couple of other tweaks here and there just to make sure that it was realizing the look and feel of what we were trying to go for on this production. So basically, just ridiculous amount of stuff to keep track of. And the fact that we had these two different locations with, again, a relatively small crew. I mean, our largest crew size was 8 people, I think, and then it went down to 6 people after we left this Daisy Hill location. And it was quite the challenge. Long days here. I mean, from door to door for the core crew, I would say that we were, door to door, not on location. We were usually doing about 14 to 15-hour days. And then if you're shooting that much footage continuously, then of course you're trying to stay up with all of the media managing and wrangling, but some of that has to be done when you get back as well. And besides that, because we were doing sort of inception, a production within a production, or a production of a production, we had to media manage and handle all of the footage that came from Ray Roman Films as well. So any camera that they rolled on, whether it was stills, it was video, it was a drone, whatever, we had to pull those cards and also back all of those up for the production. So it wasn't just at times our 2 or 3 cameras, it was like 3 or 4 other cameras that were running in their production, and essentially one person, Megan, who was handling all of that wrangling, which was amazing in terms of how organized she was on the production and how she kept track of everything. So that was, team is everything when you're doing stuff like this. And then we had the talent. So we had to deal with there's no questions here. What's going on? There was the talent, which we had to deal with, and they, kind of split up talent and also the people or the vendors that were involved in this. So it was kind of like a styled shoot. We went into Daisy Hill, and there was a florist that came in, and you'll see there's a floral arrangement there. There was floral arrangements inside this space. You'll see this table here. So those vendors had to come in and set all of that stuff up on the first day that we were here. So the first day, as a director, I decided not to schedule any of the talent, the bride, the groom, the best man, the maid of honor. We had a father of the bride. We had the mother of the bride. We had some extras, 3 or 4 extras. And so we had about 10 to 12 people at this location. We got it catered in-house for those 3 days because otherwise it would have been a complete cluster. And I decided that when we came in the first day was for vendor setup and to start shooting some content with Ray, get everything together, and then the next 2 days would be with the talent. And we ran into a lot of issues because when we were done with our first day of production with the talent, we were half a day behind. We hadn't shot any of the reception portion of the course here in this space. We were supposed to shoot ceremony and reception that first day. And so there was a lot of things that I had to work out. I had purposely decided to shoot out of order so that we could do certain things from a timing standpoint. And because the weather's so unpredictable in Atlanta, we decided to shoot the ceremony the morning of the first day with talent. So it was on the Wednesday, but I held the morning and the talent for Thursday morning until lunch as well, because I knew that we might have bad weather, and so we might have to do the ceremony the following day. What actually turned out happening was we needed to go past the morning on the first day for the ceremony. We're okay with weather, but that took so long that we went well into the afternoon. We had to shoot an interview with the DJ, and so when we came back on Thursday morning, it wasn't to shoot the ceremony. We used that time to shoot the actual reception. Now, unfortunately, there was a lot of negotiation going on because they had to take away all of the plates and the core part of the place settings, but we hadn't shot the reception yet. So I had to work out a solution with the event planning company that organized a lot of the stuff to pay somebody in my crew to basically drive that stuff back and coordinate with it getting back. So you have to be prepared. There's always going to be extras on these productions. There's always going to be surprises. When you have a number, you need to make sure that there's a little bit more on that number, because if you don't anticipate for that, then you're going to have a big problem. Megan was not just a DIT. And she wasn't a DIT, so her job really wasn't. So I'd like to just sort of, let's just talk about that for a second. So to me, when we're talking about somebody who's a digital imaging tech, their responsibility on set is to take the image that's coming in from a camera or cameras, and they are working with the DP to make sure that that image is technically accurate, and they are also adjusting that image on set if that means applying a LUT or whatever it else, or painting something, you know, on their system so that they can create an establishment of the look for that production. That is not what we had on this production. Megan's hat was to be the AC, so she was a camera assistant. So she was prepping cameras. She was a data wrangler, which she was responsible for pulling all of the media from all of the cameras and backing it up to multiple locations. We had 3 for this production. One set has traveled with me, one has traveled with her, and then the other master has gone off now to MZed for post-production. But that's a data wrangler, so she was wearing that hat, and the third hat she was wearing was as a camera op. So incredibly busy. And then James, who was the DP on the production, he was the director of photography, and he was also the camera operator for first camera. So he was dealing with grip and electric and working with those departments, small department, and then he was also operating a camera at all times. How do we handle any changes to ambient lighting, clouds, movement, etc. during the day? We adjusted exposure. We just watched. We also happened to be, unfortunately, in the flight path to ATL, the airport. So we had to hold a lot. And then behind Ray there on the other side of the lake, at a certain point, some dogs started to bark, and they were a semi-consistent element of the production. So you just keep going. I mean, you want to have quiet all the time, but it was just ridiculous. How much data was produced over the course of all those days? Not too bad, Alex. I think we were probably altogether in the 5 to 6 terabyte range, but that has a lot to do with the fact that we're shooting on C200s. So we're 150 megabits per second. If we were shooting on the C300 Mark II at just over 400 megabits per second, you can do the math. We would be, well over 10, well, probably 11 plus terabytes, whatever the math is there. So that's kind of where we were. And then, of course, in post-production, that's going to balloon, because as you start to bring all of this stuff in and you start to create render files and all of the other stuff, you have to think that that 5 terabytes is going to be considerably larger once you deal with that. But that'll all be handled by getting that master data drive, and then everything will get offloaded to, I'm assuming, a RAID, and then they will use that master data drive as a backup. And again, we will keep full copies on our end in 2 separate locations for the content for the course. So well preserved in terms of the media for the course. So changes in ambient lighting, it was just really watching what was going on. And if we saw that, like, for instance, when we first started rolling, we were in cloud cover and we were going to roll, but we looked up in the sky and we were, after a couple of takes, it was very obvious that we should just wait, because once those clouds disappeared, we were going to be in full sun for a while. And then we made adjustments, and then the crew came in. Again, these are just some BTS things. So if we needed to walk something in, we did. If we needed to make an adjustment to the lighting, we did. We didn't put a silk over him directly here, but there was at times something to diffuse the light that was coming through towards him. In fact, sometimes, a lot of this was shot in the morning. So if we take a look here, we have this particular 4x, and behind it is a joker bug. But sometimes we would just turn the joker bug off because we had sunshine coming through, and we positioned that so that we could actually diffuse that light. And it was relatively low in the sky. It wasn't midday at this point, so we were still pushing it through a modifier to make sure that that was soft. But we just adjusted ISO, because once you lock into your frame rate on a production, and of course your shutter is generally locked, then you're making adjustments with everything else that you're seeing in front of you here on this frame, and you are also making adjustments to primarily your ISO and your camera. So we were riding, well, actually two things. Let me just back that up. We were riding ISO and ND, so it's combinations of changing ND and ISO. Nice thing about the C200 and C300 Mark II is they have extended range ND. So if you need to, you can go up to 10 stops, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I don't think we went above 6, but it was there as an option. And if we were shooting in a different location, let's say we were up on a ski slope or something like that, that would be a time where you might need to, bump that ISO on a sunny day up even higher on the beach or something like that. So there you go. So let me go ahead and stop sharing here, I think. And there we go. I think, let me know if I'm back on track and you see me now. Any other questions about the production at this point? I mean, it's all kind of, I'm just back. And so my head's a little bit swimmy. I'm a little bit jet laggy and it's a little bit crazy, but it was quite the challenge. It was a lot of production in a Thanks, Travis. In a relatively short period of time. And I just thought it might be interesting to talk about that a little bit, to give you a sense of that production. And again, a lot of this was in the planning. And then a lot of it got worked out there, because when you're there and you're now dealing with 10 to 12 people who are essentially actors who are playing parts, they're not there for an actual wedding. So you have to recreate scenarios for pre-ceremony. In pre-ceremony, generally, the wedding filmmaker is doing things like, the bride getting ready, bride prep, groom prep. Jetty gem. I don't know what jetty gem. Does that mean traveling gem? I don't know what jetty. Jet lag gem. I got it. Yeah, all right. I can go with that. So still, no, it's not. So, when you're doing pre-ceremony, you're doing bride preps, you're doing groom preps, you're doing, you're doing what they call first look, which is very common now, where it's not the ceremony where the groom sees the bride for the first time. It's this little interaction which becomes another moment for the film. And then candids. And then when you get into the ceremony, it's a ceremony. And where do you position the cameras? How many cameras do you have? So on and so forth. And so we had to place everybody for all that stuff. And the same thing for the reception. You have the grand entrance. You have speeches. And we got to cover all that stuff. Hey, dude. What's up, Sky? Bart says, I've got a question. How do you get your head right after all that travel? I travel a ton too, and I always end up foggy for a day to tow and often get sick during decompression. Well, all I can say, Bart, is I'm a little foggy right now. And we have a lot of people coming over 4th of July, and I have a lot of stuff to do admin-wise to wrap this project up. But I'm not doing the post, so I don't have to think about that part of it. But you just do it, I got formulas. I try to get some sleep. I tried to stay up as late as I could yesterday. I did take a little bit of a nap early evening and then woke up and then just made myself stay up longer. I'm trying to get back on this time. I'm kind of, I have a little bit of a disease, though, when it comes to travel. It doesn't matter what time zone I go into. When I'm working, I seem to wake up at about 4 or 4:30 every day, no matter what, even if I shouldn't be. I should be sleeping longer. And it's just, there's so many things that I have my attention on that once I've woken up, I just go and I try to handle all that stuff. I'll occasionally have that like last hour in this sort of in and out sleep to get going for the day. But then I just push through. And most of the time I don't get sick during decompression. But I take vitamins and I try to drink electrolytes, and I try to have like a little kit of stuff to take care of me on the road. I always have kind of like essentials. I didn't have to take it this time, but I've got coldies and I've got stuff if I start to feel like my throat is a little bit sore, Fisherman's Friend, Olbas. I've got emergency. I've got electrolytes. I've got vitamin D. I didn't really need much of that when I was in Atlanta. And then, see, there you go. And there's a reminder for a call I have coming up in about 10 minutes. So now I'm catching up because I haven't really been in communication with anybody for, now 11, 12 days because of this production. So it's all of that as well. I'm sure I'll be jet lagged for a couple of days, but I'm just going to try to find that balance of getting everything wrapped up and also decompressing a little bit. And maybe that's the secret, is you don't totally decompress. You keep kind of moving along and keep doing something, because it's very common for people who are on big, I'm not, but on big film productions where they go for 3 to 6 months, that they get really sick afterwards, but they're not getting sick during the production because you're being driven by adrenaline and all of those things. So maybe keep doing some stuff. Like today, I'm doing this. I've got Cameron Flask at 3 p.m. Pacific, where we're going to be talking about some audio stuff that we like to use on our productions now. So we'll be doing that. And yes, Baron, I'll let you know if I'm going to be there. For standard day rates, of course. That's funny. Yeah, I put out some stuff on Twitter. If you check my Twitter account, that tends to be the C47, where I'll put out I'll cast a net there when I'm looking for somebody, and actually wound up getting our PA through there, and I get referrals through there as well. I think I actually wound up getting referral for Grip and Electric through Twitter as well. So just check that out. Jas 3 Cam, I'll say Jace 3 Cam. Love your content. First time I've caught your live stream from Australia. That's where the stuff's going to, by the way, my friend, for post on this project. It's going to get done in Australia. So I'll be missing Flask tonight. Oh, come on, Bart. You're going to go see Spider-Man? It's on the list for me in London. We're going to go probably not Friday, even though I want to. Because I'll probably be working and catching up on everything, but I will definitely see it on the weekend. I think there's some other films I want to catch up to. I mean, I'm so out of touch right now with everything. I think that's it. I think I gave you guys some background. Had a little chat. Like I said, if I've got future productions and I'm looking for people, Twitter is where I'll probably post first and foremost. Melatonin is also great for resetting that jet lag. Yeah, Alex, melatonin is great. It depends on how much attention you have on things. I've had melatonin be the absolute amazing product of all time and done the job extremely well. And then there's been times where I've had melatonin and it hasn't done jack S for me because there's just so much going on. And I'm almost like fighting the melatonin because I need to get stuff done. So that's it. What else? Make sure you have some Neosporin with you. You never know what's going to happen on a production, and you got to take care of your crew. Somebody on the crew called me set dad, and I am a dad, so I do tend to have a little bit of everything. A little Advil, ibuprofen, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can take care of what's going on. Feed your crew well. Make sure you take care of them. And pay them decently for their work, and you'll have a team generally that will be your foundation, your support. Happened to have that in spades on this particular production. And there were a lot of challenges that I had and the crew had to get through this one to get that content done. So if you have any other questions, you can go to c47.com and you can go to the contact section of the website and send me something there. And please, if you have not subscribed, I'll keep doing this. I'll keep spending time. I've got a backlog right now of some equipment in boxes over there where I need to create some actual edited content behind some products. But as I said, today at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. British summertime, is that what it's called? And Czech time would be midnight. We are doing Cameron Flask. We're talking about audio equipment and, of course, answering any of the questions you have. I thank everybody for coming to the live stream. And Sky, I'll see you there. No new toys. Oh, well, I don't think we're going to talk a lot about new toys for audio, though. I never know what Ben and Caleb are going to have. But there you go. What's up, Brian? We are wrapping up here. And hopefully you learned something, or you at least got some insight into another production. You can get pretty high production value now with small to no crew, but I would say that when you're doing something like this, if you're working with less than, 5 to 8 people, it becomes very difficult to run a production. I would have loved to have had an AD, an assistant director, to sort of handle all of the scheduling and moving people from one place to the other. Johan stepped in, and man, again, a rock star. Essentially was in grip and electric. He was in camera department. He was assisting me with some scheduling and things like that. But all good. And I learned a tremendous amount. I think I came out of this as a better director. And all of those experiences will hopefully help you in future productions do things even more effectively and just increase your game even more. So all I got to say is, again, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys on Camera and Flask. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time on Gearbox.